XAnalysts. Empowering analysts, transforming markets.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Exploring the Energy Market with XAnalysts. I'm so excited by the guest today, Rommel. Rommel has seen different parts of the business, probably starting from hydrogen. I'm going to talk about it, start doing some semiconductors, and finally falling in love with refining. Rommel is chairman and CEO of Refinery Calc, and I think the theme is refining complexity. So welcome, Rommel. Welcome to the podcast. And I'm so excited to talk about, we have done a bit of a join hands as well. But more important today is to really bring out some of the finer aspects of market analysis and where whole the refining system fits in. Welcome, Rommel.
Thank you, Mukesh. It's a pleasure to be here. And like I said, it's been great working with the XAnalysts team. And as the audience have heard, right, we forged an alliance partnership which complements, the best things what XAnalysts does with complementary technology pieces that Refinery Calc brings to the table. So this is going to be great for us to come together and talk about, one, what we're doing, a little bit of the journey speak as to how we got here, and really just hit on some key themes that the market is just going to have to get comfortable with, right? And it's this next era of data, analytics, AI, things like that. So ready to opine on all those key areas. And like I said, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Now, you're so right. I was born and brought up in refining world, 10 years in India, starting up some greenfield refineries, operating the refineries, nuts and bolts, and all the dirty kind of stuff there. But then I fell in love with refinery modeling with a lot of linear programming, and everybody used to call it's a black box. So I think I'm eager to explore what you have done with Refinery Calc. Probably you have made that box more gray or a white box so that more analysts can take the advantage, because there is no alternative to not understanding the complexity. I think gone are the days, and otherwise we end up doing mediocre analysis. So lots to talk. But what I want to start, Rommel, is that your journey, right? Tell me about it. How did you get to this refining, and how did you fall in love with it? Probably, and now probably it's more 7 years or so. You have been setting this. So yeah, just love to hear your journey.
Sure. I'll give you the high level highlights, Mukesh, as to how I arrived from a plane engineer many years ago, operating different chemical processes, doing things as far as cost reduction, productivity improvement, solving reliability failures, right? Whether it's fixed rotating equipment from gas plants to integrated refining units, the whole gambit, petchem units as well, right? For me, it's just a natural inclination I have embedded in me to figure out ways to create value, right? And what that means is it's doing a translation to improve processes from a throughput standpoint, right? I've solved burner challenges and issues, right? Furnace improvements, catalyst longevity, right? Always trying to figure out a way to how do we take something that's a waste product and how do we upgrade it and get more value, right? So I've done it in industrial gases, I've done it in chemicals, I've done it in refining, and it really just that natural curiosity. Let me tell you a story quickly about Refinery Calc. So Refinery Calc, it's Refinery Calc came about really. There was some key main ingredients that were the substantial pieces or glue that kind of gave rise to it. One was, believe it or not, COVID. People say, why COVID? When COVID hit, there we were with this technology that we kind of built and pieced together. Some industry colleagues of mine, probably for over 10, 15 years, right? We just built it then, which was like, we just called it a model. And I always had this vision, believe it or not, if we could take the model and transition it from doing, I would say, micro analysis or specific analysis through consulting And can we take it? And my dream was to get it to what I characterize now as to an engine, right? Or the technology runs, right? Those pistons pump and we get data going in and data going out, right? But the technology continues to run, right? And playing on that theme, right? We call it engine mode. Can we get our technology to engine mode where you go from discrete one-offs to data coming in, integrated, doing complex engineering, doing heat mass balances, getting data out that's meaningful and it's actionable. The other key piece of that glue, and I always give them credit, was a really good associate from mine from IR Energy, Mr. Paul Capello. Hi, Paul. I always give Paul credit because he was more so really the forefather of Refinery Calc. He pitched to me, he said, Rommel, we have a need for a technology to run off our data. Our data is real time, it's quick, it's fast, people love it, but we need to go deeper, right? And Paul said, Rommel, can you build something or take what you guys do and really run it off our data to produce answers? And I tell you, it was the second question that really motivated me to build out Refinery Calc. Because I said, Paul, we are deep engineers, right? We start with grassroots fundamentals, specs, P&IDs, right? EDMs, engineering design memorandums, et cetera. We start with that type of rigor, and then we do analysis, right? I kind of looked at market intel as taking guesses at things that really need to be structurally engineered if you really want to get to like the right answer, right? You need to have concrete foundational assumptions and information. But I asked a more improved question, was my second one. I said, Paul, why should we be interested in this? And he said, Rommel, because your wrong answer is probably better than 99% of the answers being provided now by analysts, traders, et cetera. And that, I tell you, everyone out there, those were the ingredients that form Refinery Calc. We then, Mukesh, went to work, put together a dev team, right? I spent time in the venture capital space that taught me how to build businesses, create teams, assemble them, right? Put them on a capital pathway that allowed the company to grow, right? As it hits key benchmarks, because we didn't know this would work, right? What we're doing today at Refinery Calc, right? And if you go back, like I said, during COVID era, COVID helped because guess what? We were all seated in our offices perfecting Zoom and team calls, right? Like long gone were the days of, during COVID, meeting face to face. So having a lot of seat time, was able to take this off the shelf, combine it with some of the commentary Paul gave me, and we went to work, right? We developed concepts, we tested it out. And let me tell you what we do today. What we do today and what we solve today using our ecosystem, live data coming in, right? Keeping track of every refinery's configuration, the capacities, right? We do our own research on outage activity, right? We track crude diets and we do analytics around crude diets because, like I said, traditional data partners will get it to the port or terminal. We got to go to the next layer.
Yeah, we got to go to the next level.
Yeah. We go to the next layer to understand what is the representative crude diets at the individual refineries. So we build up what I call the data ecosystem. And then, Mukesh, we do the hard part, right? The engineering, right? The first principles. And then on top of that, we're solving a global optimization problem, right? That is nonlinear, right? We don't take any. There's a key distinction here, right, between linear and nonlinear. Linear, you approximate things that are nonlinear into a linear format to get speed, right? But you forego a little accuracy, right? And you do that when you don't have compute power. But in today's era, there's a lot of compute power, and we took advantage of that, right? So we solve a lot of things in their original framework. And we do that hardcore optimization online, on fat, really fast, with a powerful, really nice, easy to use front end, right? So let me give you some metrics. What we saw, what would have taken us
just
probably, what would take, let's say if you go back 7 years, 10 years, if you were talking about optimizing every refinery in the world, it would probably take you about 3 to 4 months of continuous churning, right? And that's assuming all systems are running, they stay reliable, no power outages, as your system is running 24/7 to solve that. Like I said, for every single refinery, over 600 refineries in the world, right? And if you were optimizing them, it would take you probably about 4 months of what we call churn time. What we do in
Can I
refining,
also again?
so what we do now in Refinery Calc is optimize every refinery in the world, and we're able to do it in under an hour. Which, like I said,
Well,
if you go back if you go back 5, 7 years ago, it would take you 3 to 4 months of continuous, I would say, churn.
well, that's fascinating, Rommel, and I can see the energy, the passion, and the love and the joy of building this thing. And you hit a nail there that a lot of people guesswork and correlation is not causation. A lot of people do machine learning analysis trying to relate the things and they find good correlations, but that's not causation. I think what Refinery Calc and the first principle, the engineering principles, how crude and products and feedstocks are connected is through the causation mechanism. And I think that's the causation mechanism which Refinery Calc and any refinery model brings. The only challenge was indeed, I grew up with the world of LP modeling, very detailed modeling, really, only few people can understand. So I think you also in some ways lived a bit of my dream as well, where I wanted to, make it simpler, but not too simple. And I made my attempts when I was at Shell trade floor, didn't succeed. So really glad to see someone succeeded like you. Before we go into, I want to ask you a question, Rommel.
Sure.
What are you hearing in the market? What kind of challenges when you talk to traders, analysts? Is there something? And then I'd like to give you a bit of a context of a longer term. But first, I want to hear from you. What are you hearing in the market, people struggling with when it comes to market analysis? Is there an evolution from when you started to now? Is there a better appreciation? So share some thoughts of
Sure.
what are you seeing in the market?
Yeah, here's some of the common themes that we're passionate about at Refinery Calc that brings visibility to a lot of our customers who really have an appetite for it. Mukesh, great question. One of the things that's relevant right now, at least in the U.S. market, is it's all around the theme of the Venezuelan barrel, right? And how is that going to compete with WCS, the WCS barrel? And everybody understands the macro environment, what is trigger and what's going to allow those barrels to come here. Fewer understand the economic trade-offs, or what we would say the incremental value analysis or relative value analysis of one crude WCS versus a Venezuelan crude through the point of view of the individual refineries, right? That is a struggle question. People guess at it, right? You cannot use generic models, right? Generic Coker model, generic cracker model to get to the answer, right? It really takes the bottom-up framework that we built in Refinery Calc and some of our automated modes to get to that answer. And we're able to produce an answer like that through one of our automated modes, literally within a few minutes. We could run that comparative case in Refinery Calc with all the Gulf Coast refineries, right, in under 20 minutes. We do the same thing for Calc out there in the West Coast.
Any interesting thing you're seeing there, Rommel, coming out? Any insight, maybe?
Yeah, we were the first to kind of hit on, and we put it out there, right, to show the relative value, right, as well as the break-even point through the lens of all these refineries, right? And able to show them that, listen, them running, like Murray or something like that was going to generate a couple additional dollars in margin or value impact to various refineries. And we don't want to give away our full secret sauce, but the key is we have the capability, we have the infrastructure, we have all the componentry that allows and equips our users to get at that complicated answer, right? Remember our theme. Our theme at Refinery Calc is refining the complexity. But we were able to show distinctively the top refineries that are going to benefit from running that greater array, right? And it's going to allow them to kind of like get more utilization out of their process units, generate more value for that refinery, like somewhere in the range of like $2 to $3 a barrel. And being able, Mukesh, the key is being able to get to that answer faster than anybody else on the market as soon as those headlines hit the airwaves, right?
Yeah,
That's
no,
a
you're right,
competitive
because
advantage.
no, I think you're right. And, I've used it. And one insight which I can bring here itself is that, we have this, one of the refineries in US in the Kentucky area, the Marathon Refinery, Catlettsburg, which went into an outage. And it's the ability to zoom from macro to micro. The macro picture in the US is that the FCCs, the cat crackers, percentage of the crude run rate has dropped from 35%, pre-shale to now 25%. And a lot of the cat crackers are not loaded. And this has led to higher running of the reformers and a little bit higher running of the hydrocrackers. Now, I can understand those trends at a pad level, at a state level, but when we go into a refining, what fascinating analysis we found was that even if this refinery has access to the Canadian barrels, because it does not have a coker and it has a solvent deasphalting unit, which is a smaller unit, we really cannot maximize the value. And this refinery is processing a lot of the WTI and the Bakken and the Utica kind of barrels. So even if it has a large cat cracker, 1/3 of its crude unit, this is a 300 KBD site, this is probably loaded only 60% of the time. So that kind of a macro to micro analysis is what's really needed. And I think we were able to produce quite some interesting insights. Now, I think you set the theme very well. It's about refining complexity. It's about making a white box a little bit more understandable. You gave a very good analogy of a piston so that it's not you wait, data comes in, data goes out on a continuous basis at different levels of aggregation and fast speed. The markets, sort of don't wait. No. What I want to share and give you a bit of my thought process on how I see a bit more times ahead, and then take your views on that. So, Rommel, what I find is that crude market was the market to trade. Now, with the geopolitics around, it has become a difficult market to trade. But what I'm observing is the product markets are really becoming the markets to trade. And why I say so, with the energy transition happening, in the past, when GDP grows, population grows, you need LPG, naphtha, jet, gasoline, diesel, fuel oil, you need everything of it. Yep. Now we are living in a world where a big cut of the barrel, diesel and gasoline, we don't want. We have the EVs, we have different efficiency vehicles. So we are in a stalemate where refineries are closing, and attrition is happening in Europe, in US, and even in China, even in other parts of the world, which is leading to closures. While we may make less diesel and gasoline, but we end up also making less jet, less naphtha, less LPG, and there are no electric planes, there are no electric ships. So this kind of dichotomy, the divergence which is coming ahead for the next 5 to 10 years, I believe there will be huge volatility in the product markets. And I guess the only way to understand the product market is to understand refining. Do you see that theme? Do you see that way when you engage with clients, customers, and the value of understanding the product markets? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Mukesh. And there's, when I speak about the audiences that we interact with at Refinery Calc, right? There are differences there, right? There's those who are more, what I say, future oriented, right? They are trying to figure out what's to come next and really trade around that. And there's those that are more, they're centered around the now story, right? And trying to figure out, ways to maximize value there. But, one key thing, right, that a lot of people are trying to figure out, they don't have it quite figured out yet, right, is, we talked about EVs and a reduction in in diesel and gasoline, right, and correspondingly jet, naphtha, other products as well, right? But look, those EVs need to ride on asphalt roads, right? They're going to have to, or bitumen, right? They're going to have to ride on those roads. You're still going to need plastics and other chemical derivatives, right, that are predicated from feedstocks coming from refineries. So there is going to be I would say, waves of volatility in various markets coming up. And, what we're able to do at Refinery Calc is pretty special. It's the last, you can't guess at this, right? You really can't.
You can't guess it, yeah.
You cannot guess at, it's too complex, right? The waste products and gases from one process unit are feeding another. They're integrated. They have energy requirements, turn down requirements, right? You can't put everything through every process unit. And the traders and analysts of tomorrow, I believe the ones that are best positioned to take advantage and create value, tremendous value for their companies, are the ones that fall in love with complexity, right? Doing, simple spreadsheet math and, little correlations, or what we call thumb or stick rules, they no longer apply in a world we live in today that's predicated on data analysis and throw in AI.
And maybe I give you an example, Rommel. I give you an example. I think you hit a very important point, that there is no guesswork, there is no thumbs, there is real data, there are real crunching to be done. Yes, we were not able to do it before, but now we can. And one example is the old models will not work because China, for example, is doing a big change in their refining systems, how they are optimizing.
Yep.
China used to make about 40% diesel in their refineries. Now China is making 25% possible diesel in their refineries. They were making 5% naphtha. Probably they are making 15% naphtha. So there is a lot of diesel cracking happening. New technologies, new units are coming. So if you're using some old yield-based models where you are not able to connect the crude versus the product's quality, is it not going to work at all?
No.
So the old models are broken, and plus what I said about energy transition and the dichotomy ahead, this clearly tells me that you need to go down into the trenches. But the problem was we couldn't do it fast. So tell me why what you have done makes it fast. What did you do to make Refinery Calc or the engine work so fast? Because it didn't work that fast.
Yeah, and I can't take credit for, the total success of what we were able to pull off, right? From COVID to where we are now. I cannot take full success. We, I would say, lived passion through this whole process of creating Refinery Calc. Let me tell you what that means, to live passion. It is just this gut-wrenching belief that we could bring something to market in terms of sophisticated nonlinear optimization technology that does the engineering, that we can integrate the data ecosystem, right? Outage data, pricing data, right? Even we keep track of maintenance cycles and being able to define, the health state of individual process units. And then being able to track crude diets and things like that, and then do analytics to say, hey, here's a representative crude slate that they're running at that refinery. And being able to piece all those things together. And then you got to get smart, Mukesh, right? So one thing to do the engineering, right, and do the optimization, but you got to then be able to get smart in terms of doing and creating the development infrastructure, right? Being able to, what I'd say, webify or cloudify, right? My verbiage, right? Being able to, Refinery Calc doesn't run on-prem; it runs on a cloud, right? So you need smart development.
And it runs very fast. I have seen firsthand.
That's the point, right? Once you're doing engineering, you're doing optimization, right? And you need to put it on a cloud such that the cloud capability allows you to link to various processes that you can then scale, right? And we work with, like I said, we are proud to work with our supplier, Microsoft, that allows us to use, like I said, key aspects of their technology, plus some of the, like I said, our DNA and some of our trade secrets that we figured out to be able to, like I said, in the past, one single refinery could take you over 4 hours to optimize. And we do it on average, the most complicated refineries in the world with near real-time operational intelligence. We're able to optimize those and over about 11, 12 seconds on average, right? And then another few seconds to pump out data, store it, create reports, etc. So Mukesh, it's I went through a story there, but it really boiled down to development execution, right? Having the right dev team in place that believed, and every day we lived Refinery Calc. Because remember, we didn't know if it would work. We did not know this
No,
was going to work.
it's a tough work. I think you're right,
Yeah.
Rommel, that this is not an easy work. There is so much of non-linearity in the blending part, in the
Yep.
crude assay data quality. There is so much noise in the primary data on outages, on capacities.
Yep.
And I think people, when they're able to do all the scenarios, like you don't know what the outage is, whether the outage is a 100 kbd or a 50 kbd. But the key thing in my mind is how fast you can run the numbers, and then you can come up with a range. I think trading works on getting ahead of the curve and everybody else. So getting a range is right. Refinery tools were mostly used by refiners for micro cents per barrel optimization and crude buying. And I think that's where the value is in the hands of the traders. And
Yes.
you know what? Refineries are being bought by a lot more by traders these days.
Yes.
So I think there has to be a big game change, and probably this allows. I want to ask, within the theme, we are moving into a world where refining is fine, but the energy transition calls for higher petrochemicals going forward, biofuels, hydrogen sort of integration into the whole systems. So I'm sure you're thinking ahead of the game and ahead of the curve yourself in terms of how are you going to solve the refinery petrochemical integration challenge, the hydrogen, the biofuels. I do see that there is some work going on your side, but I think probably good to hear some of what's coming next.
Yeah, you're pulling it right out of me today, Mukesh, and this will land and hit hard and home with those listening to this. Refinery Calc, we're actually comprised of three different divisions. One is refining, of course, and we get into, like I said, refined products, crude optimization, relative crude values, things like that, right? People know us for that core, and it's sophistication that exists, but the user experience has been simplified. That's the beauty of Refinery Calc, is that we're able to allow nearly any type of user, right, who just has, basic understanding, comprehension, can use Refinery Calc and get powerful answers out of it, right? The other key piece that users probably know about us now is that we have an entire division focused on hydrogen. Remember my preamble, I spent many years.
You started somewhere in hydrogen. I saw your profile and hydrogen supply, logistics, pipeline. You've done it all.
Ran the units, did engineering on them. We're very skilled. Like we have teammates that are very skilled in hydrogen, right? So we have an entire division that focuses on hydrogen, and we've launched a lot of that intelligence and placed it inside Refinery Calc. So we have some of the best understanding of how refiners optimize and use hydrogen in their systems because we did the work for many years. What you'll find, Mukesh, is everything we speak on at our company, we're frontline, right? We are frontline participants, right? This isn't like our team parachuting in. We've been on the front lines in hydrogen refining, and you pull this out of me. We are right about to launch our Petchem Calc platform, right? Where we have refineries that are integrated with petchems. We have all those units where we're going to do the complete site-wide optimization, so our users get a really good reflection and understanding the intricate balance between refining and petchems. And so we'll be launching that here actually within the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned. Look for that. Yep, but it's here. It's here. You brought it out.
That brings me another very interesting. I had a podcast, Rommel, with someone in the metals and mining world, right? And what I learned was that world is suffering or struggling with lack of sulfuric acid, H2SO4. Now, refineries make a lot of sulfur. when they take the sulfur out of the diesel and the gasoline. So my mind was thinking that if we don't make in future, not near term, but a little bit longer term, if you are not making the same amount of diesel and gasoline, that's where we want to take the sulfur out. There will be sulfur shortage going forward. So there's going to be a link between not just the oil refining, but the metals and the mining refining. I'm sure at certain point of time, your imagination has to stretch to make Refinery Calc, not just for the oil side, some metals and mining refining, possibly. Is that something on the horizon, or you are dreaming, you're thinking, or not yet?
Well, I'd honestly say that, Mukesh, I'd answer that is we're really prepared to meet the needs of our customers in terms of, like I said, following what our DNA, what we're really good at. We're really good at modeling chemical processes, doing engineering and optimization. Really, there's no process that intimidates us. Now, the market will dictate what we go build next, right? Because we are naturally problem solvers. And our DNA is all around, right? My vision for Refinery Calc was really to take a highly sophisticated nonlinear optimization technology and make it as easy to use as an iPhone, right? That was my vision that I wanted to bring to life. And I did that. I accomplished that. And so what I want to announce to those listening to this is that we stay committed to that approach. That is what has allowed us to survive, right? And launch a company through COVID and continuously thrive by putting answers, out there into this market intelligence space, right? But by liberating users so they can use our platform to go after that answer, customize it, run scenarios. And like I said, these are users that have fallen in love with complexity, but the user experience is very easy. So we're going to stay committed to that, Mukesh, whether it's sulfuric acid or whether there's some other product.
So I think it's the barrier to convert your thought process into analysis. What was the barrier was the tools and technology. You have probably taken that barrier out. And I want to hear your thoughts, right? That when I meet some of the young people, and I think this podcast is also about inspiring young people to dream like you, to dream like me, and take on the bigger challenges. One thing which I hear is, refining is a sunset industry. It's dying. And, my response to that question is downstream is the new upstream. Look at the Middle East. Middle East used to export mostly the crude oils, but look at now Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Iraq. They have built mega refineries, integrated petrochemical refineries. And compared to the pre-COVID, Rommel, they are exporting almost 1.5 million barrels products to the market. So a lot of people get it wrong. They think OPEC is cutting crude, but no, they're just giving you crude back in a different format. And they're making tons of margin on it. Kuwait, for example, I learned, is making 40 to 50% revenue from the downstream. So the refining industry is going to be a very exciting industry. And that's where I believe there is an element where we need to coach, we need to mentor. Refining is not easy. I spent long years, so it's kind of, for me, it's fish to water, but it's not for many other people. When you go around the market, do you see here the challenge? Well, the tool is great, but I don't know refining, Rommel. First, teach me refining before you teach me Refinery Calc. Do you hear that? Are people excited about learning about refining?
Yeah, I would say let me answer that in a way that rings true from us at Refinery Calc talking with the customers. There's always this trepidation or fear at first, right? Refineries are scary, right? You just look at these big physical processes and stacks and things like that, and flares, right? It can be intimidating. What we show them is that, we've removed and stripped out the intimidation factor, right? And Mukesh, what we always try to, embed into our customers and users is that, we built this platform in a way, us doing our job, into our theme line, refining complexity, that you don't necessarily have to worry about like the optimization, the engineering, right? I go back to this iPhone, right? No one worries about, hey, Apple, what code or what program did you use, right? You're not intimidated, by the program Apple uses, right? What you want is to be able to click that button, right, with intent, right? You know what button you're clicking, you know what action you want your phone to respond, right? And that's what we've done in Refinery Calc, such that our users are able to use the complicated technology and get the answers out.
But I'm
Right? This
sure,
was
Rommel,
not
there
built
are
for engineers.
skeptics. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to
yeah.
ask you, there are skeptics out there
Yes.
who might challenge the numbers, who might challenge the analysis. This is wrong
Yes.
because it doesn't fit the conventional thinking.
Yes.
And there is a lot of AI, Chat GPT and other, GPT, where I believe there's a lot of recycle of bad analysis. There is a lot of mediocrity getting recycled, and AI is going to become, in my mind, a big recycler of mediocrity and ideas, of course. So while I love AI, but I think there is a room for creative thinking, original thinking, and the sparks that come when you run a model and you see the results and you don't understand. Your default is to call it wrong. So tell me a little bit any story you have where you have any clients, people who are the skeptics, and they are just living the old school life and they need to live a different life. Any example stories?
Well, I won't pick out specific individuals or companies.
Yeah, you should
for
not.
this professional reason. But Mukesh, step into my world, right? We deal with this all the time where various analysts, companies are stuck on simplicity. I call them stick numbers or hip pocket numbers that they may have like tethered to years ago. And like I said, think about it. A lot of the world's publications around margins and crack spreads are simplified. They use a static yield profile, right? That never changes. That's not predicated on really any really what I would call velocity, right? Or changes, right? Shutdowns, right? Intermediate processes, things like that. And so what comes out of Refinery Calc looks different. It makes people uncomfortable because it's not predictable, right? It doesn't look like something that they've been used to for 10 years, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. No, what it means is you're now going deeper, right, into the nuts and bolts and getting a better answer. And I'll say this, Mukesh, those that gravitate towards that difference, right, that's where you can make an impact. You cannot make an impact if you're looking at things that everybody else has already formed a consensus around, right? How do you then make an impact? It's very difficult, right? Those that are able to embrace differences and really get into those details and the complexity, those are the winners. Those will be the winners because they can create value and they'll be able to leverage tools like Refinery Calc.
And you know what, Rommel, not that, of course, I love to talk about XAnalysts, and I think you love to talk about, Refinery Calc, but at the heart, we love the knowledge, the experiences which we have gained over the years. We have seen all the pitfalls. And one of the pitfalls in recent times I have seen, with all the Russia sanctions, tariffs, and trade, the market, shadow market, distorted market, there's a lot of products and other molecules getting spiked into the crude. So if you're using an old crude assay, you will get wrong naphtha yields. Probably Russian crude has some naphtha spiking, some fuel oil spiking. So there's a lot more distorted markets we are seeing where the quality of the crude is not the same as an assay. And you need a system where you can quickly update, stay real time, and not use a 1982 assay or a 2000 assay and then do the analysis. So the variability on the crude quality side and ability to simulate and see the answer and not get the answer, I think that's where it will create the winners of the tomorrow. So I'm sure you're thinking about those questions as well, that the market is so distorted, so shadow, so dark, and you need a white light, and probably that white light is the Refinery Calc.
Well, we're trying, Mukesh, right? I'll say honestly, right? There are, and I can say this because I've worked inside the fence line, right? And I don't need to overcommit. There are things that we just naturally won't ever know because it's what I call in the fence line knowledge, right? And if anyone says they know it, real time, right? It's pretty false, right? No one really knows exactly what they're blending real time. No one really knows, right? For example, a refinery could have like an environmental permit issue, right? Which limits their coker unit, FCC unit, any unit, right? And that, so the satellite imagery could say it's fine, but it actually has an environmental impact, so it can't run at those rates, right? So there's a lot of nuances that can impact the output data. When our users talk with us, we're pretty transparent in telling, we're comfortable telling them what we know, and just as comfortable saying, hey, here's the actual reality, right? We don't know it, but no one else knows it either, but we're credible enough because we come from that space, we can speak on it. We enjoy serving and giving answers that are threaded in complexity, and it's our job to kind of weave these things together into a framework and platform. It makes it very easy for our users to get answers. And I would just say, Mukesh, right? Some of my thoughts that are top of mind, and the audience out there should really, take root from some of the things that we're saying here, because it comes from, like I said, blood, sweat, and tears, working, turning wrenches, climbing towers, looking at things, right? We bring that operational credibility. The answers for tomorrow is not going to be easy at all. You're really going to have to get into details and appreciate data sets and things like that look different, feel different. And then you need to do the important thing, right? The most important thing is to ask why, right? And keep asking
cause
why.
And not
keep
correlate.
Yes. That's right. It's the cause, right? The days of the low-hanging fruit answers are gone. You have to dig deeper. And you got to use tools, and you got to use analytical horsepower. You got to stretch yourself to keep learning, because otherwise, I just think, that type of crowd is no longer going to exist, right? Like the mediocrity is no longer going to exist.
And one example, another maybe, and then we'll probably wrap up, Rommel, because this is a fascinating conversation, is that people used to say you trade supply disruptions, right? Trading demand was hard because demand is 7-8 billion people, right? Consuming everything. You can't trade demand. What I know of my previous company as well, Rystad Energy, they built an extensive database on real-time demand, tracking every vehicle, every kind of the end user consumer. So, but what I challenged was that yes, you have a real-time demand, you can have a real-time supply, but you still can't trade. You need real-time refining. So I guess there is a lot of connecting the dots to be done ahead, like the data sets from Rystad Energy on real-time demand, connecting with what you have done. You can run, I believe, your refinery engine in a real-time mode, in a design mode, in a futuristic mode, in a time travel mode. And I think time travel is my favorite feature. You can run in a, you can find crude favorability indexes. So there's a lot of creativity where you can use the tool to build product balances, for example. That's what I'm excited about. And I think product supply is the holy grail, not the crude supply. And you can't get that right till you have a tool which allows you to, sort of crunch those numbers. So in that sense, I feel that, Refinery Calc and what we're doing is not just a tool to solve problems. It's a tool, I believe, for a lot of people to learn refining. Go and put the numbers, play with it, and see what the model does, and ask the question why. You will learn refining through the tool. If you can't get to the refining, I was fortunate, Rommel, to start a greenfield refinery, operated for 10 years. I traveled in my Shell days to almost 50, 60 refineries across the globe, doing one thing or the other in China, Middle East, US, and every part of the world. But we may not be fortunate that you can't go to a refinery, but you can simulate, you can play a refinery and change things and learn from and ask the question, why? So are there any use cases of just using Refinery Calc to learn refining.
Yeah, Mukesh, you hit on it, right? It really comes down to the natural curiosity of the user, right? And that user being disciplined, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. Refinery Calc in itself is an educational tool, right? You can learn so much about, a particular refinery, their configuration, the pinch points, right? What makes that refinery happy, right? What makes it sad? You can really take it to a generic form, right? And you can feed it different crudes. You can play around with it, but it stems from having like a natural curiosity, right, to try to understand differences. And I'm very proud of what we built. Like I said, I'm very happy with the relationship we forged together. I think, it's going to strengthen our capability to put out, like I said, better and improved consensus views. We're going to be able to get more granular in terms of going from macro to micro and delivering more powerful answers. And what I would encourage the audience members out there to do is join forces with us. Leave behind and let die the expectation that tomorrow's answers are going to be low-hanging fruit, right? And you're just going to be the fastest, luckiest person to pick it off the low-hanging branch, right? Join us in, like I said, falling in love with complexity, doing the rigor, being a free thinker, right? To create answers that generate significant value over others who are just going to accept mediocrity, right? And are going to accept what's already in consensus and what's already known. I tell you, there's going to be very little value to be gained in that old mantra. Join us into the future, right? We're doing some really special things, and it's not going to stop. We're going to continue.
Thank you, Rommel. I think fascinating conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground
Yeah.
on why refining, not just because we have built a tool, we built a hammer and we are looking for a nail. No, that's the future about it. And I think fascinating about how the intimidation part is removed. Fascinating about the low-hanging point you talked about. And for me, this what I call market analysis on steroids. I think that's what we need. And you needed the engine. We have the engine. I think let's go and explore, and let's be curious above all, because modeling is complex, but it's the right way of learning, and being curious is what will get to the right answers. Models will not get the right answers. At the end of the day, the traders and analysts have to get the right answer. It's a tool to test your hypothesis.
Yes.
It's a tool to test your thinking and become better analysts and become better thinkers. Rommel, thank you very much. Any last words you want to say? But really appreciate coming over and sharing your journey, sharing your passion, and sharing your enthusiasm.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you again, Mukesh, and everything that the XAnalysts team has brought to the table and to the forefront of Refinery Calc. We went on this mission together to forge an alliance partnership because you and I both believe that our two components are better being forged versus being individual parts. And like I said, we're happy for our customers, our data partners, right, to join us in the future of complexity and creating value for those that embrace it. So looking forward to what's to come.
Thank you. We both love refining. We both love complexity, but we are not fearful of that. We can handle it. And I think that's the beauty to explore ahead. With that, I hope you find this podcast listening very useful. Thank you, Rommel, for sparing the time. I'm in Sydney on a Friday morning. You're in your Houston. Your weekend is still not here. So enjoy your last parts of your winter. I'm enjoying my summer. And let's keep talking. And I'll bring another fascinating guest next time around. But for now, thank you, everyone, and enjoy learning. Stay excited. Cheers.